Good deal. Okay, tonight we are going to get rolling. We're a little bit behind, but we have a great panel tonight, and we want to learn a little bit more about some of the recent changes and some of how things look, provide an opportunity for Q&A. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, and let's get going.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelsey Bless. I'm from Children and Family Services. I am the Child Welfare Policy Administrator, and I recognize many of you in the room tonight. And with me, I have, dun, 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 you already know her, Chelsea Flory, who actually within the last 24 hours has become the CFS director. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about some of our transitions. But we're going to start with the two of us. And then we have two more panel members who will join us up here as we venture through the rest of our journey tonight. But we've also had to pivot. And so we laughed a little bit and said, of course, that's what we do best. We pivot, we are flexible, we just roll with it because we work in child welfare. So our panel was larger. It is not as large as we had intended, but I hope that you've all stayed healthy because we have had some illness rolling through, and that's part of the reason why we don't have our full panel for tonight. So with that, the agenda, we are going to talk a little bit about safety framework, just a quick overview on that. And just really to reiterate what safety framework is and how it impacts the work that we do in child welfare. And then I'm going to give you a quick little update on case management redesign and kind of the logistics behind that. There were some questions that were posed to Children and Family Services. And so we're going to then bring the panel up and talk about some of those questions from the perspective of both leadership in Three Rivers and Burleigh, being that that's where you all are providing great service to our kids in care. And then we'll see what time we're at for open Q&A. So will you be reading off of will the people use the chat, or what's the plan there? Okay. If there's a specific question and you are online and you would like to put it in the chat, Leslie will be our go-to. So feel free to do that, and we'll do the best we can to stay within our time frame. But I'm wondering, Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind. So I'm going to be moderating, and those of you who know me, I get a little chatty. So I'm sorry, and we're going to stay on task. That'll be my goal. I'm going to look to Bob, and Bob's going to make sure I stay on task. And with that, I'm going to have Chelsea talk a little bit about safety framework and really the impacts that has now in the administrative role that she is playing, but also from the perspective of leadership in Burleigh most recently. So tell us a little bit about how a safety framework was implemented, how long we've been doing this, and maybe the intention behind safety framework.
Okay. First I'll preface with I do have notes. It's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm on day 2 of a new job and I don't even know where I'm at most of my days. So if I'm reading from the notes, not to be disrespectful, I just want to stay on track. I'll also add, most of you in this room know me, but like Kelsey said, I started my career in child welfare licensing foster homes. This is my favorite place to come back to. That is my passion in the work that foster parents do, supporting the children that are in their homes, giving them that safe space until they can go home. So many of you I know I've licensed or I've worked with in one way or another. Next month is Foster Parent Appreciation Month, and I just want to say thank you for all the work that you guys do, welcoming the children into your home, but also welcoming the families and engaging with the families in a way that's meaningful. We're going to talk a lot today about engagement, and that is a lot of what redesign is about, and moving cases forward and what we call case movement, and it's really about engaging families. I told my team this when I was exiting them, that I hope they carry forward the reason why they do what they do. As their leader, I always tried to instill that in them, but we meet families on some of their worst days. We don't get to see families on their best days or when they're celebrating their highs. Often we're meeting some when they're at their lowest. And so I just reminded my team to make sure you meet them with dignity, respect, kindness, the way that you would want to be met on your worst day. We will all have that day. And I hope that I'm met with that. And so that is just something I've really appreciated about the foster parents I've gotten to work with, is their empathy and understanding for the families and the situations they're going through. So to your question about safety framework. So I had to take some notes because it's been a minute, but safety framework came into play in 2020. So that came out of legislative work on when zones became zones. So before we were county administered, and then we form the zones. And so with that, we created the safety framework. So it is we call it safety framework practice model. It is a practice model that gives team members consistent guides and tools to practice on. At the time of the rollout, I was a child protection worker. So I had moved from licensing to CPS. And I remember going out on a call with another worker, and we were assessing a baby born at the hospital who was substance exposed. And I said to her, how do you know when you are going to take custody? And she said, you just know. And this is pre-framework. And I was like, okay, you just know. Yep. And then I go out with another worker a week later. And so based on that, I said, so you know you're taking custody? And she goes, no. And I'm like, well, how do you know? And she goes, you just know. And I was so frustrated with, I don't know how I'm supposed to do it. And depending on who you went with, what they determined to be unsafe and safe, and what they determined to be immediate issues or not, was very different. And so I appreciated when Safety Framework rolled out because it gave me a practice model. It gave me tools to walk through. It gave me the language to use, but it also really shifted our thinking. I was looking back on some training, and on our UND training website, there is a brief video. And I say brief because I thought it was brief when I watched it today while I was doing some taking notes and working on stuff, but it is for foster providers to watch on what is safety framework. So it kind of gets into the 101 on what it is. So the 4 goals of it were for engaging families. So it was really supposed to shift our work from being punitive and consequence based, like you did this, so we're going to do this, into engagement. And with that, the hope is that you're doing real behavior changes. We don't want to keep coming back here and keep doing this and you're just checking compliance boxes. We really want to change the behavior. It really was built around timely reunification. So moving that along quicker. When the quicker you can do that, the quicker the parents stay motivated. The quicker that you're a lot of things you do in your life are built around hope and having hope that this is going to work. And the longer that takes, they lose the hope. It was identifying protective capacities. That was a big word that our field had to learn. What was that? And you get to a lot of that through what we've been trained on in motivational interviewing. That is an ongoing training, but that's basically sitting down with a family and going, you parent because the way you were parented. So tell me more about how you were parented. How were you disciplined when you were a kid? And a lot of that has to do with how you then parented your children. Digging into if it's mental health, if it's addiction, why those things exist. I think we'll talk about later, but none of those things are linear. It's expected in recovery that relapses happen. And the key is that you have the supports in place to help you during those incidents of relapse. So mental health to me is very similar to that. As you start digging into your mental health and you're doing really well, you feel comfortable to maybe dig into some of your trauma, which then is going to trigger things that make you feel like you slide back in your mental health. Those are expected. And so we want to make sure families feel like they can be supported through those things. And then helping caregivers overcome challenges, just being a support. I have a lot of moments that I feel very blessed to have things that the sports I have in my life. And I know that a lot of people don't have that. I was a parent at a really young age, but I think I was successful because I had family and support. So some of the families we meet don't even have that. Some of the work that we do with Safety Framework is really helping our staff understand safe versus unpleasant. So what is risky and what is just unpleasant aspects of the home. So that was really helpful with the framework to understand. I could go into a home and the home conditions can be not ideal, not what I would live in, not what I would maybe drop my children off in, but that's normalcy in these homes. I've worked with workers who said, okay, but they're staying in this situation. They don't have bed sheets and they don't even own a vacuum and they've got like 3 kids sharing a bed. That's not unsafe. That might be unpleasant. It might not be what you would be comfortable with or what your home would provide, but that's normalcy. And a lot of times that's culture, and culture on a deeper level than heritage culture, but just your upbringing. Anything I'm missing on that part so far? Okay. I don't want to keep rambling, but I will keep rambling. So yeah, safe versus unpleasant is a big topic. I think that can be hard for providers. I think we very much recognize that you are providing this beautiful opportunity for the children in your home that looked very different from where they came from. But ultimately, that is where they came from. And a lot of studies show that even if kids turn 18, they seek to know their biological family and they seek to know where they came from. And so, it's just trying to figure out what can we do to help families make the home conditions safe. Obviously, there are clear unsafe things that we have to deal with. hazardous parts of the home or not having the adequate resources. And then we use our resources in the community to try to remedy some of those things. But sometimes you do have where it's not immediate. Another perk of the safety framework was the level of intrusion. We were finding that in North Dakota we had, and again, it wasn't consistent. So you'd have pockets of the state where they might not have had custody of kids that they should have. And you had community partners who felt like they weren't doing their job. And then you could have another pocket of the state where they maybe had custody of kids that they shouldn't have custody of. And there's a lot of legal pieces that go into that. And you have to have integrity in the courtroom. So if you can't justify in the courtroom why you have custody of kids that you do, you lose your credibility for then the cases that you need to have the kids, if that makes sense. Like we want to have a good reputation. So it was really important that we had a standard practice. So we were speaking the same language. We had to do training with our courts so that when I come in and I'm talking about all the active efforts that I've made to engage mom and services or the threats of harm that I saw in the home, we had to train them on that language so that they understood what we were speaking. But it's really helped us to build that integrity for those cases that we really need to advocate for. At this time, it's like you have buy-in, like they trust you that you're doing, you're screening in and out kind of the right level of intrusion. Least restrictive is really looking, going into foster care is the highest restriction that we would place. It's the deepest level of intrusion. So we're starting from, I know this is unsafe. I can't do this. What's happening? So the first thing is somebody in or somebody out. And so do you have somebody who can come in and help monitor the safety? Do you have a grandma who can move in, an auntie? Do you have a neighbor who's willing to come in? And if that's not an option, then somebody's got to go. And it might be the maltreating caregiver or it might be the children. And then at that point, we start looking at who are your supports. We have really brought in what we call kin. It can be your cousin's boyfriend's mom who you spend quite a bit of time with. So your children, that's normalcy. If it were me, I know that I have some relatives who my children are not comfortable or familiar with, but I have some really good friends that my kids feel like our family. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. So it's really just changed the way we've looked at who are kin and who are we placing with. With that have come great programs like the kinship and different things that we're able to do to support those providers. But yeah, and then eventually you work into your highest level of intrusion, which is in the foster care world. I could go over strengths of doing this. Again, consistent approach statewide. It's helped us to be able to train staff more effectively. It's helped us to be able to coach them when everybody's speaking the same language. Again, strengthen our partners with our relationship with our partners. It's helped us build empathy for families going from a compliance base. Well, your kids are in custody. You need to get a job, get a driver's license, get an apartment, and complete your parenting program. And then families would check those boxes and go, I'm good. We knew they didn't change any behaviors though. So removing the compliances and focusing on the motivational interviewing really helped us figure out what motivates you to do that though. Like if you're disciplining physically or you're in this domestic violence relationship that's putting the kids at risk, why? And how can we help you? And maybe they don't know. So then that's when we're trying to connect them to services that are more therapeutic than your child welfare workers. But they wear many hats as they serve their families. Transparency with families. It's just really, I mean, you put yourselves in the shoes of the families that you're working with. I tell my team, especially in child protection, you carry a lot of responsibility and authority over people. It can be intimidating. You should use your powers for good, not evil. If a child protection worker came to my house and even with my degrees and my job and what I know, I would be intimidated. I'm sure I would be like, oh my God, don't look in that room though. And I would start don't look over here though. And like, of course the dog would have an accident right now when you walk in and it's just intimidating. So remembering that, there is a power dynamic there with these families and it's important, which is why I tell my team dress for your day. Like we try to dress down or dress, that's comfortable for families to feel like they want to engage with you. Yeah, I think we'll move on to data. That's okay.
That sounds good. Well, and I think too, as providers, many of you know someone or you've supported someone or maybe you've been listed as a subject in a CPS report because we take all those reports very serious and we know it's scary, it's intimidating, it is probably the worst day. And so to be able to reflect on that moment in the families that we work with as just that empathy and the compassion that we need to have for one another in those moments, because oftentimes It's not a confirmed finding as we roll through the assessment and dig deeper in that kind of thing. So just keeping that at the forefront. And I think with the data, and Chelsea talked a little bit about safety framework really being the foundation to the way we serve in child welfare. So some of the things, because foster care is the deepest end of the system, we really tried to invest more services and time into the front end. And so how many of you, show of hands, are a shelter care provider that you take short-term emergency? Yes, 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 yes. Good. Awesome. Meaning you'll take a child who is not in foster care into your home as a temporary short-term placement up to potentially 14 days. And that has been such an amazing asset to the North Dakota child welfare system, because back, I would say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we've gotten so much better at it. We were oftentimes removing kids immediately. And then we know that the court system is the court system, and our process and all the details, and kids were languishing in the child welfare system far longer, probably never even needed to be in care. I use the example a lot of there was a gentleman, he had some warrants out for his arrest. He gets pulled over, he's speeding. Of course, he's got kids in the back seat. It's now Friday at 4 o'clock. Do you think when he's arrested because he's got warrants out, he has anywhere for those kids to go? Because now he's going to jail. And so the zone did an amazing job. They just said, Dad, hey, who do you know? Do you have family? Do you have friends? Do you have someone? Because your hearing in front of a judge is Monday morning at 10 a.m. We need to get you from Friday to Monday. 4 years ago, those kids would have gone into foster care and would have been in our system for probably 18 months minimum. Because of shelter care, those children went into a licensed family foster home, and they stayed there till Monday when Dad was released. And we were able to work through the logistics, and the zone was able to ensure that there was no safety concerns, and the kids all went home and everything moved on. But because he didn't have family in the area, having you all as safety service providers was really, really valuable to that family. And we changed the trajectory for that family because of the way safety framework is working. So that 14 days, I just wanted to throw out some stats. Burleigh, for Burleigh zone directly for shelter care, we have reimbursed roughly $20,000 in the shelter care program since October. Three Rivers, it's been closer to 5,000. But the respite program, I know many of you do respite. Show of hands for providers that do respite. Thank you for that, because it's a huge stability mark for our families and for each other. Providers need a break, just like our families need a break. So $47,000 since October has been expended in respite in the Burleigh zone alone. And then about 5,000 to 4,000 for Three Rivers. So it's something that we're continuing to grow with. The numbers, because of our prevention efforts over time, often they'll say, and legislators are very curious, what has changed because of safety framework? And because we're moving into the lives of the families, trying to help with prevention on the front end, earlier and having more diversion, we have seen a huge reduction in the number of children who enter foster care. And so as we approach foster care month in May, we are at we're pretty stable to last year, about 1,040 children on any given day that are in North Dakota foster care. Now that includes zones, so all 19 zones. It includes about 15 to 16 kids from DHHS at any time. And then less than 200 children who are Title IV eligible through our tribal partners. So we work closely with 4 of our tribes. In North Dakota, we do not have an agreement with the Sisseton-Wahpeton tribe, and it would be the southeast corner, closer to South Dakota. They operate all of their child welfare through the South Dakota side. So we don't have an agreement with Sisseton-Wahpeton. But that being said, we've just seen this constant decline in the number of children that are entering foster care because that clarity of safe versus unsafe. So with that, I think we'll come back to the family first detail because I think there's other areas for it. But I do want to touch base just briefly on the case management redesign, which actually has been underway for about 18 months. It was May of 24 that case management redesign had started. And then last May, we were like, okay, we've been a year into this and it's going to take another, 6-7 months for us to go live in January. And so with that, It really started, and many of you know Sarah Stolt. At the time, she was the deputy commissioner for the Department of Health and Human Services, had a real vested interest in child welfare, and was a real champion for why redesign needed to happen. And so we know that caseworkers are overworked. There's lots to do. The checklist is extensive. We're going to hear from leaders in both Burleigh and Three Rivers about the volume of effort that workers have and how important the family is. I mean, we wouldn't have jobs if we didn't have families that needed to work with the zone, right? So first of all, we all subordinate to that family. We want to support that family. We want to help and encourage the family that comes to our doorstep and at their worst days. But we also need our workforce because we can't do the work that we need to do without our strong case management supervisors in our area agencies. And at the end of the day, and I always paint the picture of a trifecta, so think of your triangle, but that's been my favorite visual because without safe placement resources, all of you, we wouldn't be able to close that triangle. So all three need to really work in tandem. And that's something that case management redesign, and the redesign word is interesting because it's really more of a refocus. We've been refocusing the way that we look at our casework and the case management services that are offered to families, and then trying to use safety framework as the foundation, really laying down the groundwork for how we're going to build that family up with case management. So we focused on the case movement, as Chelsea had indicated, and that's how quickly a case gets through the system. And so we're going to just briefly touch on these. Engagement, how we're supporting the bio family and working alongside that family to see the outcomes come to fruition. Supervision, we had noticed, and as a member of the Champions team, the caseworkers who sat on the Champions team said, thank you for focusing on supervision. And it's not because they had bad supervisors. It's because there wasn't dedicated time to just sit with their worker or with their supervisor and say, here's the cases, here's what I need, here's what I want. And it's like, we need to be able to have one-on-one time with that worker so they get what they need and that the supervisor can provide that one-on-one time in a meaningful way. And so that's something that the case management redesign efforts really took forward, because some of the workers would say, yeah, I have one-on-one maybe like every 3-4 months with my supervisor. And we're like, whoa, no. We need to be having dedicated time at least every week, if not every other week, where we have close the door, no interruptions, focus on. And that has been really meaningful. And we've heard amazing things from workforce because they have that one-on-one time with their supervisor. So important. The safety framework practice model really being that foundation, and then our onboarding. And this is something we'll talk more about too, but how do we onboard new employees? We are a very green child welfare state. We have a number of staff who turn over time, and we need to be able to ensure that when they come to us as a new worker, they're getting the consistent training. It shouldn't matter if you're in Grand Forks or Burleigh or up in Williston, that consistent measure for how we engage in our child welfare practice. Because how many of you are serving a child who doesn't live in the Bismarck-Mandan area? You're serving serving kids from Cass, Grand Forks, Minot. And so we really have looked at it as a statewide effort to ensure that consistency. So as case management continues, because yes, we started it. We've scratched the surface in January of 26 to really start the implementation. But we have put a lot of time into the workforce, having the workforce understand what changes are coming, and then working with leadership. And I'll let Chelsea talk a little bit about what that readiness felt like as a zone, because we did readiness assessments with each of the zones. What does your workforce look like? How many staff do you have to actually do this job? Do you have the supervision structure to be able to do these one-on-ones? How is it going to be for the case management, child and family team meetings changes? Is there anything that your office would need to make that happen? And how can we do more prevention when we're needing to get kids to appointments? And then we're asking the family to take 3-4 kids and they all need to go to 5 different places at the same time. And so how do we help them? And you're all relating to that. I see you nodding. Yep. Yeah. There's kids go everywhere. And it takes a real team effort, but thoughtful planning as providers engage, not only with the families and the child, but with our workforce as a team. And if you don't take anything else from what I'm saying tonight, and as our panel comes up here in a few minutes, I really want you to resonate with teamwork, because again, the trifecta, we all need one. Without the three-legged stool, it'll fall over if you don't have the other stool working in tandem with you. And we at CFS cannot do this work without the zone, and the zone can't do this kind of work without the CFS administration and the support as well. And we need to have providers too. So before we get into the panel, I do want to address, there has been some concerns regarding the communication strategies that have come out regarding case management redesign, and I'm just going to own that. Like I sat on the champions group for 18 months. We had a deep dive into workforce, and we really put forth an effort to really ensure that our workers could get what they needed. But now envision you're riding in a plane and you're building it as you fly. And it's not a good strategy. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in that plane, but that's literally how we function most of the time. So when policy goes live on January 1st, I was still finalizing the manual that needed to go live on January 1st on December 31st. So there was a lot of still moving parts. So we really took advantage of the town hall in January to describe what the changes were and then how we were going to implement that. So it wasn't to exclude providers from being in the know. It was really to be prepared enough when we got to the time when we needed to be able to deliver what those changes were and what those impacts would be. So we'll talk a little bit about impacts as well. Chelsea, anything more on case management redesign? And then we'll have our panelists come on up, and then we'll let you introduce yourself in a few minutes.
Yeah, I was just going to add. So I was part of the supervisor's work stream, and I think when she was talking about you could go a while without having supervision. Even if we were finding that when people were having supervision weekly, they were spending so much time working on those crises right in front of them. You would meet with your in my zone, I have a supervisor who has a 6-to-1 ratio. So they have 6 direct reports, and each of those have a caseload of about 20. And so they got to go over all those cases weekly, talk about what's moving, what's happening, and then you have placement disruptions. So you might spend a bulk of that time talking about that. So that's what we found, is they have to have more intentional time, or we maybe need to shift how do we deal with placement disruptions and who's handling those so that the other cases don't get what we call backburnered, because as soon as you backburner something, when you're cooking, that pot starts boiling over. And so then we tried to really just focus on how do we help them prioritize their time. And then I think I would just advocate for what Kelsey said with readiness meetings. The plane was being built as they flew it. And as zones, especially with the child and family team meetings, there was a template that was going to come out, and our team was anxiously awaiting we call it like a script. What are we going to go over? What's the script going to look like? Because if you've been on one, you do your confidentiality, you do your introductions, and then they kind of fluidly move through their couple of checkpoints. And so we were asking, can we get that? Can we get that? So we can start training our team. And they were still building it, but they had a deadline to meet. So this go live for January 1. So honestly, the same time, like the day we got the script was the day it went live, and my team went to their first meeting, and their state partner said, "You ready to work off your script?" And so a lot of this was just kind of happening real quickly, and we were the cart was before the horse on some of it. So yeah, I do think just recognizing that is kind of with any redesign I've ever been a part of, rollout, you hope for the best, you pray for the best, but we all know that things just don't roll out the way we want it.
And I think with that, I mean, if nothing else, extending apologies to any of you who were really shell-shocked by it. But ultimately, I think in this work too, we tend to offer each other a lot of grace and have that understanding. And that's something that in working with the staff that I work with, just offering each other that grace in these moments, and know that redesign is not over. I mean, phase 1 started January 1st. We are hoping and not all the zones were ready, even at 50%. We had some that were like, okay, CFS, we're not able to do that until maybe July. We need to position ourselves with this and that and the other. And so everyone's kind of in a staggered approach, and we're hopeful by fall we'll be able to have a more common place for the redesign efforts, but it'll take us time. We know that. We ask you to be considerate of that, especially as our staff are learning the policies as they go as well. So with that, let's talk a little bit about, well, let's do introductions. Say who you are. Tell us what your favorite color is. No, I'm just kidding.
Kayla Kershaw. I am the Child Welfare Program Manager at Burleigh. I've been there for 7.5 years. Started as a case manager, so I feel a lot of the pains of redesign that we're all feeling. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, Tracey Mertz with Three Rivers Human Service Zone. I'm the foster care in-home case manager, supervisor, and I've been in that role for about 1.5 years, just a little bit shy. Been over in Morton County for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years, but have been in the child welfare field for about 24. So I've seen a lot of changes over the many years that I've been involved. So yeah.
Great. Well, you'll both have really good feedback and insight for us tonight. One of the first questions that was brought forth to us is, can you tell me a little bit about the changes, not only with redesign and policy, but like what's happening at HHS and CFS? Like there's a lot of change. And so, yes, there is. And we love change, right? Everyone's like, yes, we love change. So I've been at CFS for 16 years and I've seen a lot of change. But we are currently, as you think about the structure of the Department of Health and Human Services, we have an interim commissioner. So Governor Armstrong had started last December. And since then, we have an interim commissioner who's in charge of all things health and human services, right? So we're not just the like only game in town, children and family services. So they're dealing with economic assistance and medical services and voc rehab and developmental disabilities and all the things. So right now, Pat Trainer is our interim. We have an interim deputy as well, Aaron O'Brien, who came to us from our legislative work and was a previous legislator. And then we had an interim CFS director since September. And so we're so pleased that Kelsey has joined us as the director of CFS. That's going to offer some stability. Last September, and you may have recognized my role also being adjusted a little bit, but last September, we had an organizational shift at CFS where we got kind of reorged into 4 areas. So we have an operations area, child protection and prevention area, case management, and then child welfare policy, which includes licensing and payments, level of care, and some tribal liaison work. And that's what I oversee. And so my role changed. And so when my role became the child welfare policy administrator, we had to then open up the CFS licensing unit administrator position. So then Monica Miller got that, and the trickle effect happened. So we've had a lot of variety of changes throughout the licensing unit since September as well. At the same time, many of you probably know the name Deb Lockmeyer. She had been around for a long time within our foster care eligibility and payments area, but she resigned in her position last fall. And so we have a new eligibility supervisor for that unit as well. And so CFS itself, we have 85 staff, and we've seen some just internal kind of shifting of the deck chairs per se. But now I'm feeling like we might be getting to a stable point. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. And does anyone know the significance of April 1st? No joke. It's not a funny joke. Legit, 4 years ago, the CFS licensing unit was born. And so thank you to Becca and Rachel and Bob, who are here from the licensing unit. We did a lot of work to get redesigned where it was at for the licensing unit. And so 4 years ago, that was it. So we're excited about that. Before we go to the next question, I do want to ask Three Rivers and Burleigh if there have been staff changes or any openings or things that would be helpful for providers to be aware of. So let's start with you, Kayla.
Sure. So at Burleigh, we had recently two case management positions that were filled. So we will be fully staffed I'll whisper it. Um, yeah, they've been announced. Alexandria Lex is what she goes by, and then Steven. So they are coming from Grand Forks, and then Steven is from the Bismarck area. And then parent aid unit, we actually got an additional FTE for the parent aid unit, so we will have 5. So that's really exciting. I just saw calendar holds go out for that, so we'll be hiring for that. And then we just hired our 12th CPS worker, and we are fully staffed in CPS too. So we have shifted a little bit. You know, we have 3 case management supervisors, 2 child protection supervisors, and then my position, the child welfare program manager, is relatively new. So that position has been in place for 3 years about. So I'm about 5 months into that role. So yeah, we're doing, I mean, well for staff at this point. So
Wonderful.
Over at Three Rivers, we're of course a little bit smaller than Burleigh is, but we finally as well are fully staffed. So we've had a lot of turnover in our case management unit. We've got a few people that are pretty new to child welfare, but they're really coming along, I think. And so our newest worker just started about a month ago, but she had worked with us previously. And so she comes with at least, I think it was like 5.5 years of experience. So that's been very helpful with having a lot of new staff. So yeah, we've got 7 case managers. We have 2 parent aides full-time, and then we have 5 CPS. So we only have 2 supervisors over at Three Rivers. I want to say Morton, but at Three Rivers, 1 for case management, 1 for CPS.
Well, and I think when we have full staff and what I often will hear from with staff is I'm not staying in this role because of always what I do, but it's who I do it with. And so having that retention of our workforce, much like how we work hard to retain our providers, and what we offer for one another with support and how important that support is for one another in this work. So speaking of support, we're going to skip over a couple questions, so bear with me, folks. We did have this little guide, mostly to keep us on task and to realize that I have to focus on questions or we'll go totally rogue. But as we think about support, I want to skip to the 4th question that had come in that says, we are hearing a lot about family engagement. Why is engagement and support so important for the success of the family? So maybe Chelsea, let's start with you.
Oh, good question. To me, family engagement, the cases that I've seen be really successful, it's really putting a bridge between you and the families and like minimizing the power struggles. Like I talked about that power dynamic. It's opening the door. I said to somebody, your role as a provider, it can be frustrating when you're not met with that willingness from a family to engage with you. But I feel like your role is just to open the door. You can't make them walk through it. And I feel that way about a lot of things that we do in life, but it's just offering them that open door for engagement, that opportunity. I think other reasons why engagement is so important is because it helps the transition home. And so when that is the goal that we're working towards, the more that you can be on the same page, the more that the routines and the structure that you're offering is consistent to what and realistic to what the family can offer. You could set a beautiful routine and say, this is how we do this, and this is how we do this, and 7:30 is bedtime, and it goes beautifully. I was just giving Kenny a compliment on how great of a parent he is in his routine. But when I support Kenny with respite and his kids come to my house, that routine doesn't always land the way Kenny would like it to, because we have different activities. We have sports that we may be going to, or we just have differences in the way our household runs. We have older kids in our home, so his routine is thank you for the suggestion, but you're probably going to get them back pretty tired. And so I think that that's another really important thing for engagement. Yeah, I can see if anybody else has anything.
well, I'm Brianna Denning right now, so this is her role. So just wanting to talk a little bit about I guess the case management redesign impact for the role of a foster parent, foster provider, and what that looks like. You guys know Brianna's a foster parent and also one of our case management supervisors. She sadly couldn't be here, so just talking about clearly defining what that looks like for us, right? Making sure providing a safe and stable, nurturing environment, which you guys all do. Supporting the case plan, in talking about reunification, modeling healthy behaviors and regulation, and then communicate concerns appropriately, giving the zones and the supervisor that information, looping in the licensor when that is something that needs to be done too. And then case management redesign does complement that role. It allows for greater opportunities for engagement. Examples making the child and family team meetings more meaningful for the family instead of a report out, kind of having it be a conversation style of a meeting. And just knowing that engagement doesn't mean that we're agreeing with everybody, ignoring safety concerns or boundaries. It means we're staying respectful and keeping our focus on the child and knowing the role while allowing space for others. Do you want me to talk about the comfort clause? Okay. Okay, sorry. So Burleigh is going to be piloting a project that came to us. It's called Comfort Calls. This is something that we're going to be trying to do early on in cases, when the caseworker facilitates a conversation between bio parents and foster parents. So this would be like at their initial visit when they come to your guys' house. We do have really nice pamphlets, little flyers that I didn't bring. So we'll try to get those out so that people can just see what that looks like. It explains them really thoroughly, but this just allows the parent to share helpful information about child's routines when they go to Chelsea's house. So we know the preferences and, when a bio parent can say like their favorite blanket is, their bedtime snack is usually this. Maybe they watch a certain show when they go to bed. Different strategies that have worked for them. And then while fostering a positive connection between the two adults, right? Or 4 adults, however many are. There's 2 bio parents and 2 foster parents.
Yeah, so Comfort Calls was really some exploratory work that our zone was doing with our ICWA partners on things other states were doing for this family engagement. And so like Kayla was describing, it's there's a timeline that it's like within the first 24 hours of a placement, but we know that that's not always realistic. But as soon as we can, we want to engage where the case manager would facilitate the call between the provider and the family and to have those conversations. I think about the fact that if this was my child, I would want somebody to know she is scared of elevators. Thunderstorms make her really nervous. When she tells you her stomach hurts, that actually means she's anxious. Like all those little things that you would want somebody to know about your kid. So it's just kind of that opportunity for that bio parent to share that. It's not really talking about I'm going to do this or what's my case plan goals or that kind of conversation. It's really just focused on the child and then brings the adults together. I think what Kayla touched on is important, that part of what we need to do for children is model healthy adult relationships and healthy conflict resolution. And so it is our responsibility as the people tasked to care for them in their life to model that for them. And the more we come together, the more that it makes it. Ultimately, the point of the comfort call is when the grown-ups in the room come together, the adults or the anxiety of the child might lessen because they feel like the people are on the same page. The people caring for them are all on the same page about what's happening. So it just really puts the child in this perspective of what we're focusing on. It's not about one person or another. It's keeping everybody child focused. So we are going to pilot them. It's hopeful that if we can bring forward some good data, that it's been helpful for providers. I think it really came to us from providers who might be like, I'm not comfortable with doing that because you might have had a bad experience, and that's okay. But every situation is very different. You might be really surprised that you have a family, which to Kayla's point, we're really hopeful Bree could be here because Bree has done a couple different cases and she's could have one that she's like, I'm not engaged. They don't want to engage. My part of the child and family team meeting is really short and sweet, and then I'm asked to exit. And she has another case that on holidays. She's coordinating with them to do the visits. She's reaching out, she's sending videos. She's had cases where they're reaching out afterwards saying, hey, I got a pretty big job interview. Do you think you could help me with my kid tomorrow while I go do that? And so she's just been able to build some relationships. And every case will be different. And it's also just about setting realistic expectations that that's okay. Not taking it personally. If you have a family who doesn't want to engage in you, it's likely not your personality or them. It's just could be their trauma, their history, or a lot of times what we see is it's the shame and guilt. I know that that would be me if I was in that situation. I would think if I called you and was telling you, like I just told you, all the things about my kid, I would fear that you're other end of the call going, glad you find this is important when you made these other decisions and weren't thinking about your kid. Like those kind of judgment on the other end of that call. So it's just really opening up that door and letting them know, like, you are human, those things happen, but I want to hear about how you want me to help with your kid.
And I think it goes to the concept of like really building on that hope. And we see families who are resistant. They're not maybe real anxious and excited to jump into the Roger Loven train and have him really be there to encourage them because they don't know how great you are yet. And so trying to find that space for families to grow and trust and oftentimes, as a provider, you probably ask yourself or turn to one another and say, what can I do so that, we can stay motivated when the bio family maybe does seem resistant? They don't want our engagement. They don't want those comfort calls. They might turn those off to us. So how do we, in the system, any feedback from Three Rivers and Burleigh regarding how a provider could stay motivated? Tracey, do you have anything you want to mention on that?
Well, just listening to you guys, we do have families that are very resistant. I mean, we're child protection, we're foster care. Like, I think they have such negative connotations, when people think about that. And I know it's tough in the case management role with resistant families, and a lot of times that trickles down to the foster care providers. No matter what effort you're putting forth to engage a family, you're kind of just met with not, I guess, that resistance. I think some of it is just continuing what you're doing, all those efforts, even though you might get that resistance initially. I don't think it goes unnoticed. I think that after a parent is on their way to kind of that healthy on that healthy road and making those behavior changes, mostly what I see is it's really appreciated at some point, whether it's right away, it's down the road, or maybe even after the kids are back home. They look back at that experience, and so I think you guys you're so important to all the families that we work with and the kids that you have in your home. And I guess every family is different as far as what they're open to, what they're comfortable with. And I think about case management. Just a case that I'm thinking of is the worker tried so many different things to try to get this dad engaged, and he actually left the state for a while. Finally was at a point where he wanted to make some change, came back and is engaging. He's thankful. He's just appreciative of everything that the caseworker has done, appreciative of the foster care providers. That's my favorite part, when we're on a child and family team meeting and the biological parents are thanking the foster care providers. That just makes my heart warm, I guess. And, because we don't hear that a lot, just like case managers don't hear that a lot. And so I think being consistent, reaching out, obviously what you're comfortable with. I think every provider has a different comfort level as far as what they're comfortable with each family, and it depends on the family too, I think. But continuing reaching out, even sometimes just providing some pictures of the child, whether it's directly to the parent or through the case manager, can maybe kind of get things started and rolling, and just knowing that you're there for support, not to take the place of them, and not to, you don't look at them negatively, you're talking positively. So being cheerleaders, I guess, on their road to being a better parent.
Right. Very good. So let's reframe a little bit and go into a question that was asked, which really is it's number 6, just for reference for you folks. But how does the safety framework practice model and all these new efforts with case management redesign truly bring clarity and stability to children? I think that question maybe came from a place of, it doesn't sound as positive as I'm saying it, but I do truly believe the question came from, help me understand why, the safe versus unsafe and kids going back to their family maybe faster than they had in the past. And if recidivism, is that really stable? Is I think ultimately what that question meant. And I think it's important we address that because not everything is roses and sunshine. We know that people are frustrated at times with decisions that are made, and we don't always have to agree. I grew up in a house where, we can agree to disagree. It was kind of the way that my parents kind of led us down the road. But ultimately, I think let's reflect a little bit on how we think. And Chelsea, I'll start with you. Clarity and stability to children and how we feel safety framework in the case management redesign is going to help promote that.
Okay, I talked a little bit about safety framework. To me, tells the case managers and CPS workers, but how you're going to do what you do. It's the framework of it, and then the redesign really helped us understand who's going to do what they're going to do throughout that case movement. We were finding, especially in Burleigh County, I can only talk about my team, but the caseload and the overwhelming work that they were doing, there's a lot of upfront paperwork, whether we're doing our required paperwork for the court or for the state, or we're doing a lot of transports. We're taking kids because we definitely understand that foster parents have outside commitments. They have jobs. If I was a foster parent, to run kids to therapy appointments, and some of them have multiple. You might be OT, PT, speech, and behavioral, and you might have 2 or 3 kids. So we try our best to accommodate that. And do those things, which is why we added that 5th parent aide to our team. So just shifting some of those duties, we kind of did a workload study with our team to see what are you spending the bulk of your time doing. And when they came back and said transports and visits, I went, that is not the work of a case manager. The work of a case manager is engagement with the parent. We want you working with the parent, and that's why we added that parent aide. So we knew we couldn't shift that duty off the team. We weren't going to say, nope, we're not doing it, and then cancel all the therapy appointments, because that wouldn't be productive. So we added that FTE for that position for as a support staff. We also looked at what are other things you're spending a lot of time doing, and it was filing of documents and mailing of relative searches that are required by law, that every so often we mail out letters. That sounds like an admin duty, right? So we were able to add an admin and shift some of those duties off the case managers. So the goal after all that is that they focus on what tasks are critical to the work and case movement, which was sitting down with that family. We had a former family come in and do a presentation with my staff, and just some of the stuff they talked about, like what made it click that time when the kids came into care, and they talked about that case manager came in with the CPS worker, and they sat down with me, and they gave me intentional time. It didn't feel like I was a box on the calendar. It felt like I mattered. They had reflective listening that, I will tell you, if my brain is somewhere else, I am not actively listening to you, right? You're thinking about where you have to go next. That kid that has to get to that transport, you're probably getting a text from another case manager who's saying, hey, you got a client who just showed up here down the lobby and said they had a meeting with you. And you're like, what meeting did I have with them? And so it just really is about making sure you have engagement and then giving them intentional time. Also, just the little things and going above and beyond. That family said that caseworker rolled up her sleeves and helped me clean up my home when I was just feeling like under this mountain of depression and didn't think I could do that. And that simple activity really built trust. It made me feel like she wasn't better than, and she was really there to support me. So we just wanted to shift their duties to really reflect what engagement is. Also, facilitating things like the comfort calls or more visits. We tend to, in North Dakota, think your kids came into care, you get 1 hour a week of supervised visits. I would be devastated. I would be the lady who would probably try to like sneak out with my kids during the visit, because I'm like, 1 hour a week, that's it. They've had them full time for forever. And whether they were doing poor parenting and things happened, 1 hour a week. And so we really want to try to move that along quicker. How do we move? So we also know then you guys have work and things like that. So that puts that on our team to go get the kids from their activities and bring them to the visits and facilitate that. So to me, that is really why we did some of the work that we did to shift that engagement. And again, everything, if you can improve the engagement, then all the other things kind of seem to fall into place, like the case movement, the placement stability. That's a big one. Our team during the time study, placement moves, getting a call and saying, this kid's got to get room from our house for valid reasons. Often, we are spending all hands on deck is what we call it at our zone, calling homes, which is why, sorry if you sometimes get calls from multiple people in the same zone and you say, I just told Kayla, no, why are you calling me? We try really hard. We get creative. Yeah. We get really creative, guys. We've created like a live acting list, and the list goes out, and we're all hands on deck calling. You're going to call the people that you have relationships with, that kind of stuff. And we may be calling you out of your age preference. And do we have a child that we think you might enjoy? And I will tell you though that you might actually find that it is a big success. We recently had a provider. I'd love to share this story if I can. We've had some kids, they're teenage boys now. The parental rights are terminated. They've had a real tough go at life and at placement stability. And they've bounced and it was last summer, I believe, and it was one of their birthdays, and they were at our office. They were going to be spending the night there, and they spent a couple nights there. And I remember it was their birthday, and I walked in, and the case manager was there in tears because another worker called me and was like, hey, I had groceries in the car. I drove back, and I said, you got to go home, because clearly he had reached his max capacity. And so in that moment, that's what he needed as the director. So I sent him home, and he said it's his birthday, and this is where we're at. So of course we did things and ordered pizza and Cold Stone, had that dashed to us. And he sat there, hood up, didn't want to watch anything, we don't have a great place, but there's a TV. And so he sat there for 2 days. Finally, we found a provider who takes littles. And he said, I could buy you a couple nights. And after a couple nights, he said, I think I could get you a couple more weeks. This is going good. Just keep looking. And after I kind of what you said, Tracey, after a couple months, I sat on the child and family team meeting, and he was giving an update, and he said, he asked me about adoption, because we've adopted some other kids. And so we just started talking about adoption, and he said, maybe I would be into that. And so now you have a child who's starting to open up and kind of take down his walls and actually consider that he's worthy of. His issue was as soon as we would get an inch, he would pull back and then wouldn't think he was ever worthy of permanency and adoption. So I just think, sorry, I don't even know where I was going with that. I just think it's like just the work that we do and engaging with all parties. That didn't have parents involved, so I don't know why I was going on with engagement.
And that's okay, because I think the other piece to this too is we think about stability, and we want children to feel stable in your homes. We want you to feel like that stability happens because you have relationships. So when you're getting phone calls from workers and you've maintained relationships with them, it just matters. It matters so much. And I know even with Becca and Rachel, trying to retain providers, it's because of relationships and being able to connect and really be a liaison to the effort. Like Becca and Rachel aren't going to deal with this in isolation, because these are Burleigh kids and we're pulling Burleigh in. We're going to do this together, because licensing and the worker and you as providers can be a team. And so I think that's really important. I think the other piece to stability I kind of heard you touch on was not only stability for the children and feeling like they can feel like they're in a safe place for whatever period of time that is, but stability for those parents as you're doing those protective capacities and really building and enhancing those skills. So it isn't the checkbox. And safety framework and case management redesign really promote that. I'm wearing a sweatshirt today, and it says, remember your why. And so that is something for the first probably 6 months of case management redesign. We had to keep coming back to why we're doing this. Why are we here? And if you haven't answered that question for yourself, write it down, send a text to yourself, and really think through why you're choosing this safety service, why you wake up every morning and say, I want to continue to provide and give back to my community? And some of you probably have an answer and you're like, let me have the mic. And if you'd like to share, you absolutely can. But it really was a theme, and a theme of how we felt we needed to come back to why we're doing this work. And it was ultimately every time for the children and the families that we're serving. And I think that's important. And not only, obviously, we want them to be safe, but being able to provide this safety service too. Let's see here. Okay. And we have until 45, is that right? A little bit of time? Okay. Okay. That's all right. Bedtime. Okay. Well, we are standing between you and kids getting to bed, but a couple of things that I think will be important. There was a question that came in about with case management redesign, is there any licensing changes that we can be expecting? Is there anything that's going to take place for you as providers that we need to be prepared for? And, you know, like anything, change happens. At this point, we don't have anything particularly planned other than just remaining flexible. And if there's new training opportunities that present themselves and it can make us the best, strongest state in the nation, which is really the goal ultimately, we'll be looking for those training opportunities and anything that is emerging best practices. We really like to try and promote that. And so at this point, we follow the PRIDE competencies. Can anyone in the room tell me what a PRIDE competency is? Anyone? Anyone? You are being tested. Oh, say it again? Oh, oh, it was too long ago. Okay, so let's think about what some of those PRIDE competencies are, because that's the foundation of the licensing work that you all do. And so we talk a lot about the team. Trauma is another T word. We do talk a lot about the trauma. You are not wrong. But teamwork and being a member of that professional team. And so that is one of our PRIDE competencies. Another one is protecting and nurturing. And that's what you do. I think you could all describe these competencies with no problem. How you operate your home, how you open up your hearts in your home to children every day. But protecting and nurturing. So this is a little lesson. That's number one. And then we have meeting the needs of that child and their developmental level so that you're flexible and nimble and being able to be trained where you need to be trained. Supporting relationship building, which is all about safety framework in our case management redesign as we think about engagement. I'll never forget the story of the provider who said, you know, I ran into mom, and you'll read if you watch the 101, Safety Framework 101, I believe this story was shared. But it was a provider who opened their home to a very young mom who was going to give her child up for adoption, ended up being in the foster care system. And the providers were very willing to open their home. And this young mom came and learned how to feed the baby and bathe the baby and just didn't have that support system in her life. And without that provider, she would have never chose to be a mother and then be able to have that baby back in her life. And now all these years later has a child who's growing and they've had a big, happy family. And it's because that provider really stopped and helped support that family. And so that nurturing and those lifelong relationships became so meaningful. So the lifelong relationships and the member of the team. So those are your 5. Let me hop into, we're going to kind of wrap it up. I know there was questions regarding childcare assistance. How many of you are really happy that you do have foster care reimbursement at 100% from the foster care eligibility unit? Yes. I know we have been trying to change the way that we're doing that because I know it's difficult to get a $4,000 daycare bill, pay it, and then get our reimbursement. And you have a bunch of kids and you're having to pay the whole month in advance. It is like the hill I am going to die on. And I am absolutely working hard to try and find other strategies. We were going to work with childcare assistance, but as many of you have heard and you've seen in the news, in the last 9 months, there's been some significant federal funding cuts. And so going and putting the child welfare cases, which is substantial. We have a large number. Most of the children that are in North Dakota child welfare are under the age of 10. which means many of those children are receiving childcare services. So we're paying lots of money every month for childcare reimbursement. So my best advice to you is if you are having bills for childcare, send them to us quickly every week. I mean, you don't have to wait for the month. You can send them to us. Don't pool them up and just have a whole stack of bills waiting there. We will reimburse them from the foster care subadopt unit as quickly as we get them if they're eligible for the reimbursement. And so we've been really flexible with some families, especially the families that have, 4 littles. That's a lot of money you're paying in daycare and mostly paying it in advance of. So just be flexible with your worker, ask your worker, and we can brainstorm strategies with you. We were hopeful to get onto the portal with CCAP. That will not happen right now, but we're going to look at other alternatives for that. So just know that we continue to make efforts, but we will pay and reimburse you as soon as we get those bills. So turn in those 920s. Any thoughts on safety framework or case management redesign from either Burleigh or Three Rivers before we kind of do some closing remarks on what's to come?
I guess the only thing I've been looking forward to the redesign. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it for quite a while, but I think really it just complements the safety framework. It enhances a lot of what we're already doing, but we're also, that engagement with families is huge. And I feel like we're already seeing, along with the safety framework, just how that's, how it's been successful working with families and allowing them to maybe be a little more comfortable, and we're pulling in more family supports. And so when we have providers that are on board and doing that same kind of work with the family, I just think that's great. So we just appreciate everything you guys do.
Okay. Clarification on how those comfort calls might work. Is it personal cell phone? Is it Zoom call? Is it Teams meeting? Like, how does it happen?
No, good question. So the initial one is really why we have the case manager facilitating it. So it'd be a phone call. I mean, hopefully that's what we would do if the family is, so basically case manager in my head, and it's a pilot, guys. So just run it with me. I'm going to be coming over to do the visit in your home, and this is your placement. And so I'm going to let the, bio parent know, or the caregiver know, that I'm going to go visit your child tonight at 5 o'clock. Would you be free to take a phone call? The child isn't engaged in it because this is really, again, the adults in the room having the conversation. So when I would get to Dell's house, we would call the bio parent and the caregiver, and we would do that phone call together. We would do that as many times as we needed to. The goal is until they can do that without the case manager maybe having to facilitate it, keeping it centered on the child and what they're talking about. So that's kind of how it would work. I would say there's tips and tricks. Reach out to your licensor or your case manager if you're leery about starting some communication. There's things I've seen providers do to get creative. They've created an email that then they use with them, or I know that there's apps, I'm going to butcher them, but there's like WhatsApp apps that you can create like an account that you can communicate with the provider if you don't feel comfortable with them having your phone number, things like that. So I've seen providers get creative to do that.
That's a really good idea. If you don't have a like a foster care provider email address, and you want to consider opening up a Gmail account for that, and obviously you probably don't want to use all your personal naming conventions and details if that's what you're trying to protect in some regard, but it's just a nice landing place to have even just email simple back and forth communication. So good idea. What's next for CFS and child welfare in North Dakota? So we're going to have phase 2 of the case management redesign underway. So we've been, easing in, and I know that policy is policy, and like you're talking to the policy administrator, so I hope you're all following it. But the reality is not everyone is at 100% on the policy either, and we are offering grace to the system. We're helping and bolstering offices that are calling saying, how can I make this happen? I understand this is what the policy says. And so we're working through those logistics dependent on what the office needs are. We continue, and we hope we can continue to see the number of children in foster care go on the decline. Obviously, we don't want those numbers to be creeping up. We have seen about the same rate that the number of children have declined. We've seen the number of foster care providers decline. And so if you have friends and you think that they would be a really good individual to join the party and provide the service, to be encouraging that. You know, the history has always shown our data to be about for every 10 homes that we recruit, we lose 9. And so when we're losing 9, it's not all bad. We've got families who fill up. They don't have any more room to be providing the service. We have others who are relative caregivers. They're licensed and they're specifically licensed for their niece or nephew, grandkids. And so when those children achieve permanency, they close their license. And so we see that as a pretty common denominator. And then also the families that just have a lot going on. It's a busy time and they just kind of feel like they're at their limit at a point, and then they may choose to come back down the road. There's a national federal initiative that's happening, and you're going to hear more about it. And it's called A Home for Every Child. And the goal behind A Home for Every Child is that we would have families waiting for kids who might enter foster care instead of having children waiting to get into a family foster home. So it's a shift in philosophy in how we are trying to match children in the child welfare system. And in North Dakota, we're lucky because we're a more rural state. We have way less numbers. So when we're talking to our friends in Indiana and Texas, California, they're like, what? You only have 1,040 kids in care? And we're like, yeah. And then they're like, we have that in one of our counties. So they've got 14,000 kids in care that they're trying to manage. And so we're blessed in the fact that yes, we have good work to keep kids with their families and in their home communities, but the Home for Every Child, I just want to reiterate that doesn't mean that you can only be licensed for one child. So there's been a misunderstanding about what the intention of that bill is. And it doesn't mean that it's just like, oh, Leslie can only have one now. It means that yeah, but you're totally fine with that. But it's really to ensure that we have a number of homes available to the volume of children that are in the system. And so we'll be continuing to do recruitment pushes to increase our volume of homes. So we have those families that are waiting for the children who might enter the system. Let's see. We also do how many of you remember Champion for the Child? Getting an email where it was like, here's the picture of the child. Okay, yeah, hands are up. That's good. So we haven't done Champion for a Child recently, but our task force, we've brought it to them. They think it's a good strategy if we're having a difficult to place kiddo. We also had pitched the Circle of Homes approach. So if Kenny was saying, I can't do a full-time placement, but Dell was like, yeah, me neither, but maybe they could share it. That would be a Circle of Homes approach where the child would go for 3-4 days to Dell's and then go for 3-4 days to Kenny's, and they would be rotating. And so the Circle of Home approach, I think, is a strategy that if you are interested and you feel like you really would do a pretty fantastic job of supporting this case, but you don't really want to do it full time, but you would share it, we are open to that. And we have payment strategies to make that happen, and we can brainstorm those solutions with the caseworker. So keep that open in your mind about what you might be available to do. As we think about dramatic changes, I think having new leadership offers opportunity. And so we're excited for what that will mean. And so we'll wrap by Kelsey sharing any final thoughts on where we might be going. I know we've got legislative session coming up and
Ross, yes. Yeah. So we had a question in the room about, we push reunification and why do we get year orders and why don't we do it maybe monthly or something like that? As your child welfare team, we would agree that is beyond us. That's a court process, right? So the court systems are overloaded. We could hardly get in for when we can get in. And then if you get into your criminal courts, bless them. They have open positions for a long time that they're trying to fill. And then charges sit on tables, which do impact the cases that we work when we have pending families with those things and court orders. But so to your point, that is, I'm glad you brought that up. That's an initiative of mine, is to really dig into what we call family court or ICWA court, and how can we get families into the court. There's just more accountability. There's accountability on the workforce to be able to talk about your active efforts in quicker time than just once a year and draft up your affidavit. There's accountability on the family. So it is something I do want to look into, is how you do family court and we get there quicker, but that takes buy-in from your court partners. That's just not because we want to do it and we're going to say, I'll see you in 6 months. I'll see you in 3 months. That's just their docket, how often they can get us in there. They're overwhelmed. And then again, there is always a trickle down effect to those things. And then that would put on our team, instead of writing an affidavit maybe every 6 months or once a year, you're writing them monthly maybe, which is okay because then they're shorter affidavits because you're there more quickly. But I do agree with that. I do agree that it's accountability and case movement.
There are some jurisdictions that do 6-month orders, but that's just not a statewide effort. And we work closely with Court Improvement Project, which is through the Supreme Court, and then they work with our local juvenile courts and state's attorneys and defense attorneys. So it's something we continue to bring up, but it really does take the action of the local court jurisdiction to say, we want 6 months and we won't give a 12-month order. But the law requires that an order is granted for 12 months or less. So they could go less. They can't exceed the 12 months. So we're thankful for that. And so they usually give the 12 months. Oh, question?
Any question, but it's more of the back end. So say, unfortunately, you have a family that isn't responding and doing whatever. So I guess in my experience, I've sat in on our hearings where the judge recited the days the children have been in care. In one case, it was 1,300 days. In another case, it was like 1,340 for one kid, 1,370 for the other kid. And I'm like, is there, I know the focus is on engaging with family full time and giving them every opportunity, but at what point do you look at total time care and say, hey, we need to turn the corner, or is it focus constantly going to be on whatever opportunity there is to give them? Let's give it to them, because I know the judges in both cases that I'm thinking of were very critical of the fact that it made it up. So.
Yeah. So his question was just about the time of care. Sometimes it varies case by case. And then at what point, in my opinion, you're just saying, how long do you go until there's that limit? So I will say we have in policy how many days you have to go until you're allowed to. It's a minimum. So that way we're not going at 20 days, 30 days, 150 days. So you have like a minimum amount you have to meet. But again, every case is different. Every judge is different. Every state's attorney is different, what they're comfortable with. I will tell you that our state's attorney, if you even ask to go like a day before you do, she feels like you need to do more efforts because we want to make sure this is a solid case that you're bringing forward. Also, one of my closing speech things was just like, every case is different. There's cases that have court orders that prevented us from doing visits and reunification because there's no contact order while they sit through their criminal piece. And so those are taken into consideration. Should those days even count against them? If of that 400 and some days, 150, I wasn't even allowed to see the kids, could we really even engage? If parents were incarcerated, then on top of it, another 200 and some days, and then all of a sudden they're out and we start engagement and we're coming close to that day, should those days really count against them when we didn't have that opportunity to work with them? And then they're out and they're working with us. We do trial home visits where the kids might have gone home on a trial home visit and things were cooking along real positively, and then we had moments of setback and we pulled that back and we went again. So there is no cookie cutter. Families do not fit into one mold. That's a frustrating answer for you, but I just think ultimately we are, when you work with humans, you don't work in an assembly line of a factory where everything fits together. It's there's details. So in closing, I was just going to say, if you ever have questions, just talk to your case manager. There's reasons why things happen. The biggest one I always get brought to my attention as the director is that case manager has not been into my house in 2 months, and you're required to do a visits per policy in my home every month. My response, and then I usually loop in the licensing team, and we can staff the case. We could talk about it, because if that's a performance issue, I do want to know if that's what's happening. But often there's little details going on where policy says that's best practice, but you can also see them outside of the home, and that might be while we're doing therapy or transporting the child or seeing them at school. And additionally, if we're seeing the children in the home of a caregiver, or you're on a trial home visit, we want to prioritize those spots for the visits. I don't always want to see the child in Dell's home if I would have an opportunity to see the child in mom's home, because that's where we're going. And so I just think having conversation about the concerns you have, it's often not an intentional act that your workers are doing. I would also cater that to a power dynamic. Like Kelsey said at the beginning, we have a very green state of employees. A lot of you are seasoned. You've been doing this, you have experience, and that is intimidating. And so I have learned that I've had workers who I'm like, wow, Dell's called you 4 times, and now she's calling me because you're not taking her call. And they're just, I'm nervous to take her call because, and it is not Dell, but I mean, I've heard that, and they're nervous because they're like, yeah. And then now it's getting worse and worse. I'm like, gosh, you're making it worse and worse because you're just not taking their call, but it's intimidating. So just, again, I'm just gonna wrap up with being kind, giving grace, having understanding. I can tell you from being in the building with this team, these people are trying the best they can. They're doing the best they can with the training that we give them, which is baptism by fire. We have a beautiful onboarding manual from Redesign, and we have seen success with it with our recent new hires. But it is often you have a caseload before you even know how to put the password in the computer, because it is just that's the capacity we're at, and you're exposed to things you probably aren't even ready to be exposed to. I'm also an initiative of mine is to work with the universities on some maybe some different training they're giving while people are going through their degrees on child welfare, offering a child welfare class, because we do child welfare certification once you get trained. And is that something we can do with the universities? Because we are shell shocking like some of these employees when they come in, and if there's a hearing that they can attend, we have found that when you debrief with them, that was tough for them to sit through that hearing. And then we're doing some coaching and mentoring through that. So I don't know, just give grace, just like you. We ask to give the families grace. I mean, everybody, no situation is the same, and you don't always know what's happening in the background, especially when there's court orders or no contact orders or things like that. Any other questions?
I think, as we wrap up too, roles and responsibilities become so valuable in understanding what each person contributes to a case. And so as provider, you're providing the safe home and the cares and the feedback to the worker and the day. I mean, you spend more time with that child than anyone. And so what you are sharing is important and valuable. And we are always, and I look to our licensing team because I often will say, we're looking for individuals who are willing. Who's going to step up to the plate and be willing to do this? This is not easy work. It's messy. It's hard. It's complicated. You need to have thick skin. You need to be a good partner, and you need to have that grace. We also want individuals who are flexible. And so we were flexible today. We went from a 6-person panel down to a 4-person panel, and that's okay. Flexibility is really key in the work that we do. And then having tolerance. Because what tolerance looks like in my house compared to maybe what it looks like in Chelsea or Tracey or Kayla's house is different. But if we all offer some tolerance, we're going to be able to offer those kids stability as well. And so, the joke is, Kelsey, really, that's willingness, flexibility, willingness, tolerance, and flexibility. And I said, I'm really not trying to say WTF, but that's like legit what it is. So willingness, tolerance, flexibility. And if we can find the providers who are willing and tolerant and flexible, man, we are the strongest state in the nation. So thank you all for your time tonight. Reach out to any one of us if you were to have questions, or to your licensors, and they can absolutely connect us to you. Enjoy Foster Care Month. We're just 2 weeks away from May, so appreciate all you do. And thank you for inviting us. So
I'm going to come over here because I can't awkwardly stand in front of you all. I don't know if I'm on the camera or not, but speaking of foster Care Appreciation Month, Foster Parent Appreciation Month, whatever we call it, we're having a Foster Parent Appreciation event next month. No training, only fun. It's really because of, why am I blanking right now? Help me. Haven Hills. I could only think of Foster Hope in this moment. Haven Hills is sponsoring this event. It will be here at Evangel again, but on the opposite side of the building in the big auditorium we were at for Christmas. Auntie Jade's Catering. I'll tell you about that later. Ask me if you want to know what that is. There's a comedian coming for entertainment. Childcare is provided. Details are coming out soon. This is an in-person only event. So sign up as soon as, well, I think the RSVP is out there already. So you can already start getting registered. May 7th, that's a Thursday again. If you haven't paid your dues, Adam will take your dues over there for the year. Just remember, if you don't pay your dues, you can't come to cool events that we do. That's how it works, okay? And it's $20 for your whole family for the whole year. Thank you so much for being here tonight, you guys. That was really good, really useful. I have more questions. I'm saving them. But I just think, man, can you imagine coming up with this whole child welfare system? And trying to come up with all the ways that you need to do it to handle all of the scenarios. There are never going to be perfect parts, right, in anything that happens in it. And we just have to come to grips with the fact that some of it is not perfect. It doesn't look great, but they're working on it. And so thank you guys for working on it. Okay, pick up your kids.